appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, South by Southwest. Oh, no. Listen, you might not know this. I am president of a historically black college. All right? Historically black colleges are founded on the black church tradition. The black church tradition is a call and response tradition. In the black church, you don't get to just show up and sit there. You can't just sit there and be a participant. We need you. The black church tradition stands on over 150 years of black ministers who have stood before congregations and implored them to do more, to do better, to engage. So when I say good morning, I don't just want you to say good morning back. I don't just think it'd be nice. I'm not saying we're in Mass and we're Catholic. I'm saying that I need you to give me back the energy I give you. So let's go to church. Let's start over. Good morning, South by Southwest. There we go. I am so thrilled to be here. I am here because I was inspired as a child. I was inspired not by educational heroes. I wasn't inspired by John Dewey. I wasn't inspired by Confucius. I wasn't inspired by any of those amazing individuals like Jaime Escalante. I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall. I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall. Well, Thurgood thanks you for that, all right? I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall, but not the Supreme Court Justice version of Thurgood Marshall, as inspirational, as impressive as he was. I was inspired by the Thurgood Marshall who came before that. I was inspired by the Thurgood Marshall who is a high school student at the Colored High School. And by the way, he went to a high school in Baltimore that, just to make sure people remembered who they were, was called the Colored Training School and High School in Baltimore. As if all the black people who were there, because that's all who were there, were going to forget who they were, okay? He went to the Colored High School, and Thurgood Marshall was a mischievous student, okay? He got in a little bit of trouble, but this is the difference between then and now. When Thurgood Marshall got in trouble, he wasn't marched out of school in handcuffs by a police officer. He was told to memorize the U.S. Constitution. Okay, now think about that for a moment. That meant that his teachers understood that there was an untapped gift there, that there was brilliance there, that they were going to challenge him, they were going to push him forward. And so when he did that, he tapped into a place that he could go. Imagine what happens if you have teachers who believe in you that much, that see you as a star and not a criminal. That is impressive. Thurgood Marshall left the Colored High School in Baltimore, and he went to Lincoln University for college. He was an honor student at Lincoln University. But after that, he discovered that he failed. He did something just like many of us who have applied to law schools. He didn't get into the first law school of his choice. He failed at that. He failed not because his grades weren't good enough. He failed not because his LSAT score wasn't good enough. He failed because he wasn't white enough. Thurgood Marshall wasn't permitted to go to the University of Maryland because he was black. That sent him on a path to Howard University that changed all of our lives. Because at Howard University, he ran into the brilliant genius of Charles Hamilton Houston, Charles Hamilton, who was the dean of Howard's Law School. And together, that relationship for the next 30 years sent us on a path that changed America. I was inspired by the version of Thurgood Marshall who stood before the body of the law, the institution of the law, and made it do things it had never done before. He took it and refashioned it and repurposed it and pushed it forward. He forced it to do things for people it was never designed to do them for. He took an institution and used it for social change. I am here before you today because that version of Thurgood Marshall inspired me. That version of Thurgood Marshall pushed me forward. That version of Thurgood Marshall challenged me to look at higher education and think of it differently. It is because of that version of Thurgood Marshall that I'm here this morning to talk to you about Quinn College and what we like to call not that, what we like to call nation building, all right? Listen, there's a reason why I'm the college president and not the IT director, okay? All right? So if we're going to talk about Paul Quinn College, we're going to talk about the history of Paul Quinn College first. We were founded in 1872 by the African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Austin College in the basement of Metropolitan Church, AME. All right? If you haven't been there, visit. It is a wonderful school. It is led by a Paul Quinn College graduate today. We existed in Austin College for 5 years. Then we moved to Waco, where we existed from 1877 to 1990. In Waco, the school was known as Waco College, and then it was given the name Paul Quinn College after Bishop William Paul Quinn, who was bishop of the Western District of the AME Church for over 30 years. After that, Paul Quinn moved to Dallas. And here's the thing. Paul Quinn College, founded in 1872, a historically black college, was founded just like all the other HBCUs to educate freed slaves and their progeny. That's what we were founded to do. And when that is your mission, you are educating people who come to you without much money, who in many cases come to you without much training. Because if we remember back in 1872, there were no prep schools coming out of slavery, right? You didn't go to slavery prep to prepare you for college, all right? It was illegal to write, it was illegal to read. So our charge has always been to grab, to hold, to love, and to lift. And that is what we do. But 130 plus years of doing that for students who come to you without many resources doesn't build $1 billion endowment. No, in fact, it creates a scenario where you are without for much of your existence. So the years of making a way out of no way, of doing more with less, left the school in a fragile state. And by 2006, the Boston Consulting Group had done a study which said that Paul Quinn College had a year to 18 months to live. That if there weren't dramatic changes made in that time, the school would be forced to close its doors. Now, that is the time that I got a phone call from the new chair of the board who asked me if I'd like to be president. So here's the thing. When people call you and offer you a job you didn't apply for, one of two things is going on. Either one, you're amazing, and people are just sitting around thinking, we should give that guy this job. Now, if you believe that, you're also crazy. All right, you're an egomaniac, and you don't deserve a job. You need mental health training and professionals, okay? That's not how it works. More than likely, it's the second reason. No one else wanted the job. All right, so I understand that. I got this job because no one else would take it. Because why else would you hand a job to someone with no training in higher education, no training in education? I'd never had a job in education. I'd never taken a class in education. A point that my sister, who is an almost 30-year teacher in Chicago, likes to remind me of regularly, okay? In fact, I'll give you a window into our sibling relationship. When I called her, I was part of a group. We were negotiating to purchase the Memphis Grizzlies. If we had been successful, I would have been the president of the franchise. And I get a call while I'm driving to scout Kevin Durant. Shout out to UT alums out there. That's right. There's only 3 of you up this early because the rest are still down on 6th Street, right? But my sister, I called her, I said, listen, sis, the chair of the board just offered me the presidency of Paul Quinn. And my sister's incredulous, right? She's like, oh, of course they did. She's like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever, okay? She said, first of all, you're buying a basketball team when I know you have no money, okay? She said, secondly, people just call you up and offer you a job while you're driving down the highway. She's like, do you know who you are? She said, you are the Black Forrest Gump, right? She's like, stuff just happens to you. Just out of nowhere. She's like, what's next? Are you gonna join the Olympic team playing ping pong? Like, she's like, this is ridiculous. So here I am. I'm offered a job that I am incredibly unqualified for, right? I have no training, and I get there and I realize that we are in trouble. And we are in trouble not in a way that you're in trouble that you understand intellectually, but you understand emotionally. There was no path forward for us by simply doing what other schools did, but they were doing it longer and better. That wasn't going to work for us. We weren't that type of institution. We didn't have those type of resources. Our way forward was going to have to be through doing something different. And that different for us was turning the institution around and saying if we were going to design a university for today's era, for today's students, what would that look like? If we were going to demand our place in higher education, how would we do that? How will we break down those doors? Because let's be clear, higher education is full of a type of elitism that is stifling. Okay, I have spent my entire life in those institutions. My degrees are from Oberlin, shout out to my Obies in the house, right? Oberlin, Duke, and University of Pennsylvania. And Quaker love, all right? But Quinn College isn't one of those institutions, right? So our way forward was gonna have to be something different. We were gonna have to be less of a college and more of a movement. And that's what we became. We decided enough of being Quinn College, let's become the Quinnite Nation. And the Quinnite Nation exists because we understand something that many people don't, and that is this: roses can grow out of concrete. Roses can grow out of concrete. At Quinn College, our students are students that other people look at and dismiss. They're students that come from places that most of you don't want to go. But yet here they are, and they have survived that. They have thrived in that condition. You want to talk about grit? That's grit. You want to talk about determination? That's determination. This is Jasmine Norman. She's from Memphis, Tennessee. She was the salutatorian in her class. Every year we do an exercise with a group called Dear World, where our students get an opportunity to write what reflects them on their bodies. Those aren't tattoos, okay? Those are messages. She is declaring, I am a rose that grew from the concrete. So how about we create institutions that make it a little easier for roses to grow out of concrete? Here are our students. The students at Quinn College, 80 to 90% of our students are Pell Grant eligible. 80 to 90%. I'm always fascinated when I read these articles about schools that say, oh, we're making so much progress. We have 10% of our student body that are Pell Grant students. What? 10%? You want a cookie? Right? You want a cookie because you have 10, 15% of Pell Grant students? Walk in my shoes. Walk in our world. 80 to 90% of our students in any given year are Pell Grant students. 70% of our students have zero expected family contributions. You want to talk about full pay? We are full need. And that is a different world. And we are never going to turn our back on that because we know something other people don't know. There are a hell of a lot more of them than there are of the other ones. Right? So let's go get those students and teach them how to end their cycles of disruption and dysfunctionality. The average ACT score is a 17. So what? That's just numbers on a page. Maybe the problem isn't that you couldn't learn. Maybe the problem is people couldn't teach you. Right? So we're going to teach. 23% of our students are Latino. And I know it's a historically black college and people get a little miffed at that. Like, it's historically black. Okay? I mean, we are still plenty black, I promise you that. All right? But we are so secure with our blackness, we are so secure with our culture that we don't fear welcoming other people's. Right? We can celebrate you. Thank you. We can celebrate you without diminishing us, and we understand that. 40% of our students come from outside the state of Texas, right? We are a national institution that is very diverse, and we are proud of that. We have an ethos, because if you're going to have a movement, you have to have an ethos. Our ethos is we over me. The needs of the community supersede the wants of an individual. In the Quinnite Nation, you don't get to be selfish. We exist because we understand that all of us do more than just any of us. We are together. We are a unified body. We will put the needs of others ahead of our own personal wants. You do not get to be selfish in this game. Right? Selfish people destroy the fabrics of communities, and we're trying to build, not destroy. We have values. We have the 4 L's of Quinnite leadership. We demand that you leave places better than you found them, that you live a life that matters, that you leave from wherever you are and you love something greater than yourself. Those are easy standards. Leave places better than you found them. That means pick up your Starbucks cup before you leave. Right? Start simple. Leave places better than you found them. Live a life that matters. You are going to have a legacy. People are going to talk about you after you leave. How about we make sure they say the things that you want them to say? How about they say you lived a life that was regal, or you lived a life that made a difference in the lives of others? How about your story is a story for the ages? Lead from wherever you are. Everyone's a leader. You can practice leading in everything you do from day in and day out. Don't wait for someone to tap you and say, oh, by the way, you're going to lead now. Practice leading every day so when the clarion call comes, you are prepared. And love something greater than yourself. Find a cause. Find something to devote your life to and spend your life doing that, chasing that. But if your cause is yourself, you have failed miserably. Your cause must be larger than you. It must be greater than you. Love something greater than yourself. We have a character test. Did you choose the harder right over the easier wrong without apparent regard for self-interest? Again, we are driving you back to this notion of selflessness. Make good decisions. We tell our students, closed mouths don't get fed. When you come from under-resourced communities, you are taught that you don't have a voice. You are taught that your voice doesn't matter. And you are taught that every day because you look around and nothing changes. The poverty that you see continues day in and day out. What message does that send? That tells people you don't matter, you don't have an opinion, and we don't care. So we are teaching our students, get up, stand up, speak up. You have the ability to make your voice heard. We expect you to make your voice heard. Let's make your voice heard together. Allow us to help amplify your voice. Closed mouths do not get fed in the Quinnite Nation. Thank you. Then, and this is a little different for historically black colleges, we think you can be our kind without being our color. Little known historical fact, historically black colleges were never all black, right? Remember, we started right out of slavery. Who were our teachers? If you weren't allowed to read and write, who knew how to read and write? White people, right? So historically black colleges always had people who were our kind and not just our color. There's room for everyone at the table. We just want to know that we are all eating from the same dish. That makes a difference. So here are our beliefs. We think poverty is evil. We think the idea that people live in poverty in this country is embarrassing, is reprehensible, and determines that demands to be changed. That's what we believe. We think debt is bad, okay? What is the logic behind telling people who are poor that the way out of poverty is debt? The way out of poverty is money. Right? Our messaging is all wrong. Okay, and you can talk to me about discount rates. If you charge $60,000 and you give a student 30, they still have to come up with 30. That doesn't work. That's bad math. We believe everyone can learn. Everyone can learn. The issue is, can you inspire them? Can you inspire them? Do you love them enough? Do you care enough to figure out how to teach them and not just teach the way you're most comfortable with? And then we believe, and this is incredibly important, that our next must always be better than our now. Our next must always be better than our now. Universities are here because they understand that idea. It is a bet on the future. So let's believe that. Let's remind our students of that. Where you are today, where you start does not have to be where you finish. We can change that. This is our formula. We preach hope. We practice patience. We instill resilience. We are entrepreneurial in our thoughts and actions because we spend a lot of time hanging out with the people at Babson College. And we lead with love. And the most important one of these is leading with love. When I was a young college president, I was stressed out. I had just turned 40. I was frustrated. I was in charge of a school that was failing. And there was no guarantee this was going to work. And I faced a very real possibility that Quinn College could have survived Reconstruction, could have survived Jim Crow, but it couldn't survive my presidency. And that scared the daylights out of me. And one day on campus, I got into an argument with one of my male students. And it wasn't pretty. It was not the high point of my career. Okay, he and I are yelling at each other. We might have used some language that you wouldn't find on the SAT, right? But we were going at it. And we're having this argument, and he follows me up the steps to my office, and we get in my office, and he breaks down in tears. I have no idea what to do with that, right? I was too far gone. Okay, I was too far like, what's wrong with you? Like, go sit there. What? Thankfully, I had one of my staff members in the office with me. She comforted him, and then she took him out of the office, and then she came back and turned her attention on me. Now, she was the quintessential Southern mother, okay? She sat in the chair, she looked down at the floor, then she looked up at me and she said, baby, I met your mother, and your mother was tough on you. She said, but you have never spent 1 second of your life wondering if you were loved. She said, in fact, you show all the characteristics of someone that's been overloved. Did you just throw some shade at me? Did you just on the low talk about my mama? Right? Right? So she said, so for you, when you hear tough, you only know love. But if you haven't known love, how would you hear anything else but tough? She said, I know you love them, but if you want them to know you love them, if you want them to follow you, to trust you, you need to lead with love. The single best leadership advice I've received in my life. There has been nothing better than that. Lead with love. It saved my presidency, it saved my school, and frankly, it saved my life. Because I stopped functioning from a place of rage and started functioning from a place of love. And love has made all the difference. So, you know our ethos, you know our values, you know our beliefs. Now it's time for you to know our goal. We have one goal. It is a simple goal. It defines everything about us. And our goal is this. We want to end poverty, period. That's it. Now, those of you out there that didn't clap, you might think, well, that's not really what colleges and universities are supposed to do. They're supposed to worry about graduation rates and retention rates and do research. Yeah. Okay, I understand all that. We worry about retention rates and graduation rates. That's why we've raised our graduation rates over 20% since I've been there. And we're going to raise it another 10% over the next couple of years. That's why our retention rate has grown by more than 35% during my presidency. And this year, for the first time freshmen, from fall to spring, 89% of them came back. Now, there are people who will tell you that schools with 90% Pell Grant students can't do that. Well, you can't do that if you're trying to be a college, but you damn sure can do it if you're being a movement, right? Because if you're a movement, you approach your students differently. You stand in their shoes. You walk where they walk, right? We are here to end poverty. Our motivation for ending poverty is quite simple. 45 million Americans live in poverty. 45 million Americans live in lives that have food insecurity, that have substandard education, that are filled with crime and fear. That's not right. Our motivation is that for the first time ever in the history of this country, more than half of the students in public K through 12 education are living free and reduced lunch lives. Can you imagine that? If you weren't in school, you might not eat. That's not right. More than 50% of students who are in college today are on Pell Grants. So let's do some math here. That number was created before the public schools turned to majority free and reduced lunch students. Now that that is majority number, what do you think is going to happen to the Pell Grant number? It's going to skyrocket. That's not right. We don't need people to tell us what it's like in these communities because we go to these communities. I don't need my recruiters to tell me what the schools are like because I've gone to the schools. Okay, I have walked the neighborhoods that my students come from. I have walked the hallways of their schools. I have sat in their classes. I have been cold when they are cold. I know what it's like not to see any chalk, any markers on a board. I've seen that because I cared enough to get up off of my behind my office and go see where my students are coming from. If I can ask you to come to my house, I think it's only right that I come to yours. When you know that, when you know where your students are coming from, it affects you. It changes you. Poverty changes you. And look, I can't pretend that I grew up in poverty because I did not. But my parents grew up in poverty. My father never went to college. In one generation, entrepreneurship changed my family on my father's side from a man who never stepped foot on his son's college campus to a son who's a college president. So don't tell me what's not possible. But once you see poverty up close, once you see how your students live, how does that not change you? How does that not make you angry? How does that not make you frustrated? How does that not make you want to change everything about that equation to end poverty? And we can talk about whether schools are the appropriate places to do it or not, but here's what I know. The people who could do something about it aren't. Right? Look at this headline. Billionaires made so much money last year, they could end extreme poverty 7 times over. And yet extreme poverty still exists. It is still with us. And it's not like people in poverty don't have access to Google. They can read this headline. So what are they left thinking? No one cares. Well, you know what? We care. And we're an institution that is dedicated and devoted to ending poverty. So that's what we're going to do. That's why we turned our institution outward to address the needs of the communities we serve. That's why we challenge other schools and universities to do it as well. Now look, let's be clear. That's messy, okay? It's not polite. It's not easy. It doesn't make you popular at cocktail parties, right? You know, you show up, you've got your drink in your hand. It's like, so tell me, what's your philosophy on quantum physics? Well, my students can't eat, so I'm going to put quantum physics on the shelf right now. Oh, you're just too heavy. You're just too heavy, right? That doesn't make you popular, but it's necessary. So we didn't start out with this philosophy, but some things happened along the way. We were in a food desert. We were closer to the city garbage dump than we were a grocery store. Let that sink in for a minute. We're a 4-year college that was closer to the city garbage dump than we were a grocery store. And it was like that for well over 20 years. What message does that send that community? What message does that send the children that grow up in that community? So we're in a food desert, and I'm thinking, how hard can it be to get a grocery store or restaurants? I know people. They've always been nice to me. We have a great time at their cocktail parties and dinners. I'll just ask. Spent 2 years, and people kept turning me down. The best answer I got was from a friend of mine who was helping me, who said that the last grocery store they went to wouldn't help us because the people in that neighborhood didn't look like their clients. That neighborhood is overwhelmingly Black and Hispanic and poor. So you're saying that Black and Hispanic people who are poor don't deserve a grocery store. Okay, so we got mad, right? We got mad, and then we got lucky. Got a call one day from Trammell S. Crow. I didn't know Trammell S. Crow. I thought it was a prank call, right? I thought it was one of my friends being a jerk, okay? Call him back, turns out, oh, it is Trammell S. Crow, right? And he says, I'd like to go to lunch. Well, we go to lunch, and we're sitting at lunch, and we hit it off. And during the early stages of my presidency, I called up other college presidents, went to their campuses, went to talk to them to get their advice, all right, to see what it is that I could be doing better and how we could help the school. and went to dinner one night with Gerald Turner, the president of SMU, and he gave me great advice. He said, whenever you're with people of means, ask them for something. Right? Get them in the habit of supporting you and your institution. So this was my first time since that dinner with someone of means. So I'm sitting there, we're eating, and I was like, Trammell, the people in our neighborhood, they really need a grocery store. It would be wonderful to have a grocery store. Trammell, without missing a beat, says, you know what I'm really passionate about? Community gardens. Community gardens, and he goes on about community gardens. Now, I'm no genius, but I recognize I'm not getting a grocery store, okay? So my response is, Trammell, I have recently become fascinated by community gardens myself, right? So he says, well, if I gave you money for a community garden, do you have some place to put it on campus? I was like, yeah, we can put it on the football field, right? And he said, can you do that? I was like, I'm the president. We can do whatever I want to do, right? Now, what I forgot to tell you was the first act of my presidency was I terminated the football program, okay? Which upsets my football player and alums to no end, all right? And people always talk about, oh, you're so brave for cutting football. Look, I didn't cut football at the University of Texas, okay? We weren't playing on TV. We weren't winning national championships, okay? So we put the garden on the football field, and people find out about it, and some folks from Pepsi come to visit, and the Pepsi folks say, hey, this is really interesting. I said, you know what we should do? We should turn the whole football field into a farm. And then they asked me again, they're like, can you do that? I was like, I'm the president. We can do whatever we want to do, right? So they said, well, do you have an agriculture program? And I say, no. And they said, well, do you have someone to run the farm? And I was like, I don't like where this is trending. I said, I'll be right back. So I run out to my assistant's desk, and I called the youngest staff member, and I said, listen, didn't you major in economics at Spelman College? And Spelman College is an all-women's college. It's amazing. That is a shameless Spelman plug because my wife is a Spelman alum, and I have to go home after this, okay? So she says, yes, I did. I was like, great. You are going to run our farm. And she says, we don't have a farm. I was like, we're about to have a farm. And she says, I don't know anything about farming. I was like, I don't care about that. Just Google it, okay? Just Google it. That is literally how our farm started, okay? She Googled what grows in Dallas, all right? It turns out a lot of stuff grows in Dallas, okay? So from that moment, 8 years ago, our farm has grown over 50,000 pounds of food. We give away, thank you. We give away 10% of everything we grow. We call it tithing to the community. And then we sell the rest of the food to area restaurants and stores. But you know who our largest customer is? The Dallas Cowboys, right? Yeah. So here's the thing. We have now sent more kale to the NFL than we ever did football players, right? So the picture here, this is James and Darcia. They run the farm. They're extraordinary people. They love what they do. This is a picture in front of our new farmers market, which they started this past summer, and we're extraordinarily proud of them. We turned the institution outward to force people to deal with the idea of food insecurity and how it affects people in urban areas. And I'm proud to say that as of last year, the city finally got around to helping us get a grocery store. And so now the neighborhood has a grocery store. Thank you. So dealing with poverty ended a food desert. That's one. Number two, the city about 7 or 8 years ago came up with this idea that they wanted to turn the garbage dump into a super garbage dump, right? And the largest garbage dump in the Southwest. And they were going to do that without doing any community impact studies, without doing any town hall meetings. My students and I found out, we turned it into a class, right? And then the students took ownership of it, and they created a movement, the I am not trash movement, or the we are not trash movement. Now, if you are a historian, you know that we borrowed that from the Memphis sanitation workers strike, the I am a man, all right? That's using your history, that's using your knowledge base. The students came up with great slogans, groceries, not garbage, right? That's genius. We didn't win, but we inspired a group of people to file a lawsuit against the city which permanently prevented them from doing that plan. So our students changed that fact. So we're taking that education and we're turning it outward. We're addressing the needs of the community we serve. We ended a food desert and we stopped an environmental injustice from occurring. But maybe the biggest thing that we've done, that we are doing, is we're dealing with this idea of the cost of higher education. We are a work college. We became a work college because there were two things that we had to acknowledge. Number one, our students couldn't afford the education. Number two, our students were graduating and they weren't prepared for the workforce. Now, that's not just us. We're just the most transparent about it. Because here's the reality. $1 trillion of student loan debt in the marketplace. $37,000 is the average student loan debt for undergrad. That's not just Paul Quinn students, that's everybody. Everyone has that problem. About preparation, well, let's talk about this fact. Almost 80% of all employers expect their entry-level hires to come to them with real-world work experience. That means they're not getting those students from us prepared to do the jobs they need to do. 50% of college students wish that college had given them more real-world experience. It's not working. The current method of higher education, the current practices, doesn't work for the majority of people who are going through it. You want to know something else? The students are already working. 70+% of dependent college students work more than 20 hours per week. 80% of independent students work more than 30 hours per week. The students are already working, but they're working in jobs that make it difficult for them to succeed academically. So what if we changed all that? What if we brought the work inside the academy and regulated it in a way where it fit with the students' academic goals? Now, I wish I could tell you that we just woke up one morning and thought of this, but the reality of it is we got the idea from the Cristo Rey Network. I was in Detroit visiting the Detroit Cristo Rey and talking to their president. He explained the model to me, and I said, why wouldn't this work in higher education? He said, it does. They're the work colleges. I said, those are in rural locations. Why wouldn't this work in an urban location? He said, no one's tried it. That was music to our ears. We got our board, and by the way, we have this incredibly supportive board because you can't do any of this unless you have a board that gives you the thumbs up. And ours happens to be a board that is progressive and believes in innovation, and we are blessed for that, okay? But we became an urban work college, the first one in the history of the United States. We are the first HBCU, the first minority-serving institution, and we are proud of that. But let me tell you what it means to be a work college. First of all the students that live on campus are required to work, right? They work between 10 to 15 hours a week. Some students work on campus in jobs in our offices, but the real plus of this program is the corporate work program, where students go off campus, they work in schools like Parish Episcopal. They work in companies like Encore, AT&T, JCPenney, FedEx. They're getting real world experience in addition to going to class. They have a work transcript. They have an academic transcript. So you know what they are taught to think and that they are taught to do. Our students receive an annual cash stipend, right? If you work off campus, you get $2,000. If you work on campus, you get $1,500. Because our students need money, right? They need those resources. We also created the option for our students to graduate owing less than $10,000 of debt for 4 years, okay? Thank you. Thank you. This is important because, again, the way out of poverty is not debt. Okay, it's not. And then the other thing we did was we got rid of textbooks. Do you know how expensive textbooks are? So unknowingly and unwittingly, we had created a caste system in our classrooms. The students who could afford the textbooks and the students who couldn't. And the students who couldn't afford the textbooks, they weren't not purchasing the textbooks because they didn't like the material. They needed the money to do something else with it. Why would we do that? Why would we send that message when we know it and we can do better? So we got rid of textbooks. We only use open source materials, right? And it's working out amazingly well. Now this is our model. This is how the students pay to go to school. We used to charge almost $24,000 a year. Last year we charged $14,495. Now that's everything. That's not the little hidden costs, like that's not tuition, and then we don't tell you about room, board, and fees. No, that's everything. Tuition, room, board, fees, all of it. You can come to Quinn College and pay less than $15,000 a year, okay? Here's how that gets paid for. Remember, the majority of our students are on Pell Grants. So the Pell Grant's worth almost $6,000. That knocks out tuition. Then the work program gives you a $5,000 credit. That's $11,000 of that $14,495 already covered, okay? Then from there, the average student picks up about $1,200 more in aid, which leaves $2,300 of unmet need, which means you can graduate from college owing $9,500. Now I want you to see something. There's no endowment lurking behind us covering any of the cost, okay? Our endowment is a rounding error for most schools. All right, so we don't have the luxury of using that. This is how you manage things and be good stewards of your resources. So that's now. I gave you our history. I talked about how we got to this place, but let's talk about Nation Building 2.0. Let's talk about what's coming next. And I am incredibly excited about what's coming next. Here's what we're doing. We are creating a national system of urban work colleges, all right? So we're gonna have a network and we're gonna have a consortium. The network is going to be Paul Quinns all over the country. We are coming for your town, okay? So we're going to open up Paul Quinns that are united by a common system of academics and a common management group, right, which will allow us to cut costs, and we will pass those savings down to the students. And every student will get this same type of education that we're going to talk about in a second, all right? But not every school is going to want to be Paul Quinn. We respect, as much as we can't understand why not, we respect that, okay? So we're creating a consortium. And by the way, when I say we're doing these things in real time. We anticipate having our next campus presence open by the fall. We are meeting at the University Innovation Alliance this coming April to form a group for the consortium of schools that are gonna go forward and embrace this system. Okay? So you can come join us and we will teach you how to do this model, and you will do it with a family of institutions that are dedicated to working together and solving this problem for our students together. And we don't care about the size. We're not an institute. Look, it's like the title of my dissertation. Size doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter. We believe that small schools can do big things, and we exist for that. So here's how we're going to do that. Now, you've heard about we over me. You understand the work model. Now let's talk about learning. We're going to introduce and implement, starting in the fall, something called reality-based education. Reality-based education. And here's what that means. That means that we're going to include the students' life experiences in their classroom materials. All right? So first way you do that is experiential learning by having the students do the work program. Secondly, you do it by creating project-based learning that is fused with entrepreneurial thought and action. So how about this? Can you imagine if you were taught to solve the problems that were important to you? Yes. That you were taught to solve the problems of your life? Imagine if you're a student from an under-resourced community that is a food desert, and instead of going to economics and learning about charts and graphs that you can't figure out where the hell they're supposed to go anyway. Wait, I might have been talking about me. But instead of doing that, that you were taught how the economics of inner city living add to the fact that there are no grocery stores. What if you're taught how to deal with that? What if your classroom becomes your life? What if you're in group projects? Because here's what we know. There's a set of skills that all students must have to be successful, right? All of us. Being able to work in groups is one of them. You have to be able to work in groups to be successful in this era of being a professional, right? So group projects that teach you how to solve the problems of your life. And we're infusing that into all of our classes. Now, the other thing about it is we're a liberal arts inspired institution, okay? And the inspired is incredibly important, all right? Because that inspired gives us room to evolve. Because look, I believe in the liberal arts tradition. I'm a product of the liberal arts tradition. I appreciate the pursuits of the mind. I appreciate being a lifelong learner. But my students didn't come from my background, right? I knew I was going to be okay, right? My parents had done well. But how do we not acknowledge the insecurities that families have today? Maybe instead of using a model of the liberal arts that was handed down to us from the ancient Greeks, and I love the ancient Greeks, they seem like cool people to party with, right? But let's be honest, the ancient Greeks never had to deal with food deserts. The ancient Greeks never had to deal with crime the way that the inner cities are. The ancient Greeks never had schoolhouses without heat, without air conditioning. Their liberal arts were for a different time. Let's create some liberal arts for this era. How to do that, you say? I'm glad you asked. We call it the Quinnite arts because we brand everything in the Quinnite nation. All right? So this is the new version of the liberal arts. These are the liberal arts for today. We want to teach the students to write, to speak, to reason, and to be digitally learned, okay? Because that's what you need to do today to be successful in this version of America. So we thought, what should we have every class include? Every class going forward, writing across the curriculum. We're going to require students to write because we all know if you can't write, you're not going to be successful, right? So every class is going to require students to write in it. We know that if you don't have the ability to speak effectively in public, you're not going to be successful either. So every class now is going to require students to stand up and give public speeches. We also know that you have to be able to think critically. And that's more than being able to think, should I use Snapchat, Instagram, or Facebook, or Twitter? Okay, you have to be able to function at a higher level. So now every class is going to require you to engage in critical thinking and reasoning across the curriculum. But all of that is great. But if you don't acknowledge the place technology now has in our lives, then you are kidding yourself. So why don't we teach the students to be masters? So let's do building digital mastery across the curriculum. Now, built into all of that, into the reasoning, into the digital mastery, is how we will deal with our quantitative classes as well. This gives us the opportunity to bring today into the classroom and to take students who started out a little bit behind to catch up. Because let's be honest, every rose doesn't bloom on the first day of spring. All right? So let's plan for lifelong blooming and not just seasonal blooming. This reality-based education, coupled with our network of urban work colleges, is what higher education is going to look like. And it doesn't have to just look like that in the cities. It can look like this in the rural areas because we know that far too often they are left out as well. This is who we are. This is what we are. This is the future of higher education. So we have covered a lot of ground this morning, and I thank you for taking this trip with me. But I also realize that I am also, in addition to being a college president, a professor. So I told you what we were learning. We've hopefully learned it. Now we're going to go back and review it. Okay? All right, so we talked about movements. Let me tell you how you create a movement. Let's summarize it. First, the keys to creating a movement. Number one, failure. Movements don't start because you're happy. That's not how it works, okay? Only in higher education do we expect revolutions to start from above. We think the schools who have everything should teach those who have nothing. What are you going to teach us? Like, you don't know what it's like to walk this path. We could teach you some things, right? Let's see you fly without a net. Let's see how you function in that world. Failure, the inability to access the things that you need for the purposes that you want, is motivational. So you want to start a movement, fail first. Secondly, righteous rage or love. You either got to be really angry or you have to love someone a whole lot. because it causes you to tap into places that you are willing to devote your life to. That is incredibly important. Failure, then righteous rage or love. You need to have a vision. You can't just be mad, right? You can't just sit there and be like, I'm so angry right now. This doesn't work. Like I'm failing. No, you have to have an idea of where you're taking people. Okay, you need a vision. Now, a vision without a plan is foolishness. All right, you need to have a plan for how you're going to succeed. We believe in that. And then lastly, you need to keep going. My first few years of being a college president, people laughed at me. People laughed at me. They told me I was going to be a failure. They told me, I will never forget this. I sat in a meeting and a sitting college president looked at me and said, your school should have never hired you. Right? Yeah, I just want to point out, I still have my job. Right? Hey, don't act like there aren't some people that you want to settle some scores with, okay? Right? I'm evolving. I just haven't evolved that much yet, okay? Now, these are the keys to creating a movement, and they are important. But the last piece of this is incredibly important. It's always remember, it's not about you, it's about them, right? It's about our students. This is Asia Morrell. She's also from Memphis. Look at her face. She is hopeful. She is excited. I don't ever want her to lose that, right? And she won't lose that if we put our arms around her and we love her. And listen, I know we're in a bad era. I'm not talking about creepy love, right? I'm talking about authentic love, the love that you are supposed to feel for your students, right? It is about them. But this is just at the beginning of that journey. It also has to be about them, your graduates. What are they leaving with? What are they going forward with, right? That is important. But more importantly, it's about your students who are coming. It's about your students who graduate. But it's really about the ones that are coming next. Okay? This is my son. Okay? He's not a freshman at Paul Quinn. Okay? This is my son. This is after commencement. Each year I bring him to commencement because I want him to see what it looks like. He has grown up his entire life expecting that great things happen for people when they work hard and they go to school. That if you lead a life that is dedicated to service and selflessness, that you can change not just your life, but the lives of a community. If you have control of institutions, you can change them to affect social good. My son is being inspired by the same family tree that inspired me, by Thurgood Marshall and those individuals like that. This is what nation building looks like. This is how you create movements. You create movements by remembering who you are and whose you are, that you stand on the shoulders of giants, which means you don't get the choice to be small. We must all stand up. We must rise up. We must understand that this is our time. If we allow another day to go by and function without a sense of urgency to change the educational experiences of our students, but not just the educational experiences, their life experiences, if we think it's okay to give an A education and an F life, we have failed them. We have been small when they needed us to be tall. So I challenge you right now to come forward, to join me, to join the movement, join the Quinnite Nation. And if you want to know how, here's some ideas. Thank you for the honor of your attention. Thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. 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 I wish I could take a picture of you standing up so I could show my students, okay? Some folks have some questions. We're going to try and answer as many as we can, and we'll run through it. So the first question is, what does your faculty development look like, and how do you see it as different from other institutions based on the unique student population? That's a great question. So our faculty are partners with creating the reality-based education, okay? But you need to understand something. We don't have tenure, okay? We don't have tenure, and it's no big deal, all right? It's no big deal because no one's in the classroom trying to tell them what they can teach, right? We are partners in this journey, but we have to be able to move in real time, and we have to be able to move fast. And I am blessed to have an amazing faculty that is led by Dr. Chris Dowdy, who does an enormous amount of lifting and a great job. So our faculty development is we are constantly providing them opportunities to evolve. So we're excited about that. How has your faith contributed to your success? Listen, I walk by faith and not by sight. You cannot succeed in what we have done if you don't understand that there is a higher power, right? I understand that. I also understand that because as a faith-based institution, we see things regularly that we know. There have been far too many times I've had to get on my knees and say, Lord, I've got nothing else, right? And that next morning, something amazing came. And it didn't come because I read a book overnight, okay? What was your first win that made you confident that you were doing the right thing? The dress code. The dress code. We have a dress code. Our students come to class in business casual. And we have a clothes closet. And we do a gently used clothing drive. Now the clothes closet is sponsored by JCPenney. They provide the majority of the clothes in the closet. Students can go in and get whatever they need for free. We took a lot of flack for having a clothing drive or having a dress code. People said, well, they're college students. They should be able to do. Listen, our students came to us needing everything. So we didn't have the luxury of not providing things. So the fact that people embraced that dress code gave me the confidence that our way was going to be a non-conventional way or an unconventional way. What convinced me to take the job? How long will I stay? You sound like every person we try and interview and hire, okay? What convinced me to take the job was that everyone in my family, with the exception of me, went to a historically black college. If you went to college, you went to a historically black college. I am who I am because these institutions got it right. So this is a thank you for that. This is also a thank you to those Paul Quinn alums that when I moved to Dallas after law school at Duke, that took me in and made me feel like I was family, even though they had no reason to do so. This is a thank you to them. And then lastly, it's because I thought I could make a difference. It wasn't any more complicated than that. How long will I stay? Why do I have to leave? Right? Higher education is really fascinating. People take jobs to get to their next job, which means they're not giving their all to the current job they have because they have one eye open on something else. I love what I'm doing. If I was worried about my next job, we couldn't have done half the things we've done because they're nuts. Right? Tell us about our faculties. Are your salaries competitive? We've got a lot of faculty members out there, right? So our faculty salaries have increased over $20,000 since I've been president. Right now, that's not enough, and we're going through a review of the institution's salaries right now. We have a compensation committee that is going through determining what do we need to do. Here's what I will tell you. We don't lose people at Paul Quinn College over money, right? Now, I took a 40% pay cut when I came to Paul Quinn, all right? So I understand it hurt, right? I'm not asking anyone to take pay cuts, and I don't like people being stressed out over money. If you want to come to Paul Quinn, come see me, and if you fit our culture, we will find a way to make it work, right? So the questions have disappeared, which I'm guessing is the hook, okay? But let me just say again, thank you so much for being here this morning. It has been such a privilege, and I hope that in your walk in life and what you do in your jobs and your careers, that you will challenge the status quo, that you will always do more for others, and that you will remember that this is our opportunity to make the difference in lives of people who need us. Thank you, and please enjoy South by Southwest.